Man, it's great to meet you. I'd love to dive into our interview with beginning with the fact that we're coming up on the 4-year anniversary of COVID and this
Yeah,
pandemic. How did you make it through that time period, and how did it change you?
man, Joe, it was an amazing time in some aspects, and other ones, dude, it was just brutal. So, um, it started out, like my wife and I actually, we think we had COVID before COVID was named COVID.
Yeah.
And we had all kinds of big plans. We're going to go travel. We went and got like our TSA pre-check. Dude, we came back sick. We were out for 3 weeks.
Wow.
And then we ended up about a month and a half later going out to Social Media Marketing World in San Diego. It's a social media conference. And man, that seemed like the last conference that happened, Joe, when COVID came out. And we came back from that and we'd seen my father-in-law and he had beat cancer, a couple years before. Well, we then got the diagnosis in April that it had spread and shown back up. And because things had closed down, he wasn't able to go get chemo and passed away in July. And man, that was like the domino that really set things for my wife and I and our family, just, kind of moving forward. He passed away. My mom, or my mother-in-law, sorry, I call her mom. She ended up, having health issues and ended up moving her out here. And so that has really been like a 4-year journey for us, just in that relationship there of
Yeah.
getting her here, her stuff here, trying to help her with, her health, grieving the loss of dad. And the thing that came out of it, Joe, was my wife and I got clarity that we didn't have before on what do we want our life to look like going forward. This is the best season of our lives. And it's like to look at retirement coming down the road. What do we want that to be for each of us individually,
Hmm.
for us as a husband and wife, for our children, our grandchildren? Joe, it's those conversations that you don't usually have. We had those and we
Yeah.
had them with our children. And there's so much clarity about what we want to do and what we don't want to do, but it's defining it and figuring it out. And then as part of everything that was going on, man, it's like men's mental health and our personal growth and development is a huge thing for me, Joe, because I came out of a traumatic childhood.
Yeah.
As I healed and transformed, it changed my family. And that was then when I launched my coaching, the podcast, Living Fearless Today. When I launched all that stuff in the midst of COVID, it was like I was able to see how my family had changed and the dynamic and how my wife was able to grow when she's not dealing with an insecure, husband who it's like, hey, if I do something great, he's now going to be mad and have all kinds of issues. Right. So she was able to step into who she was.
Yeah.
So again, it was really challenging on an extreme side,
Yeah.
but it's also, Joe, it's like what opportunities did it create?
Hmm.
And were we able to then, step out in a way that we wouldn't have before when it was just, kind of smooth. We didn't have all the changes that COVID brought with it, right? So yeah, it's been an extreme situation on both
Yeah.
sides, but dude, it's also been so elevating. And that's what I choose to focus on, Joe, is like
Yeah.
what's moved the needle for me and my family and, um, just how do we keep going forward on a positive note?
Sounds very revelatory, which is wonderful. I mean, all the way around. I mean, that's the thing that I think with life, we all know there's ups and downs, and you just got to take and you just got to kind of sift that out, find the yolk from the egg white and just kind of go from there. The thing that's interesting about this Chiefs win is I remember going to that parade that year, and I think that was probably one of the last largest gatherings on earth. And they
Yeah.
said that if the 49ers would have won and they would have had the parade, it would have spread so much more because it was on the coasts. Like it really hadn't hit the Midwest yet. So
Yeah.
all of those variables are wild, man. Just how it happened and mutated, and so let me ask you this: I know you're a podcaster, I know you're a coach, and you have all of these parts of you that make you who you are. But let's get to the essence. I'm going to put you in front of a bunch of third graders. It's career day, and one of the kids says, "Hey, what do you do for a living?" How do you answer that child?
I help men be happy and to step into life the way they want to. Too many of us play small. We don't have that confidence. We lack the vision, the knowledge of who we are and what we can do. When we're that third grader that we're talking to, Joe, there's usually big dreams,
Yeah.
right? I want to be this. I want to be that. I came from the side, Joe, of wanting to escape my family because of what was going on, the childhood trauma, and wanting to be somebody else. But so often we feel trapped. And so I think I would also say I help men to break free of the chains that hold them back from stepping into the life that they want. And I know that was the case for me. I was a cross between Eeyore and the Hulk. I felt like
Yeah.
I was a victim and things happened to me and I couldn't catch a break. And I was ticked off, Joe. Like,
Yep.
I was Wreck-It Ralph, kind of destroying my career, my family, the relationships around me without realizing just because I was so mad. And a lot of us as men, we think we're the only ones that do that if we're aware of it. But the truth is, we're not. And
Right.
so, yeah, helping men to break free of the chains that hold them back. Um, I would explain that to like, my oldest grandson.
Yeah.
Uh, I would explain it to him in that way.
But what did you ultimately want to be when you were a kid? What was your dream to grow up and become?
Oh, Joe, I just wanted to get out of my home
Yeah.
because there was mental, emotional, physical abuse that was going on. And I didn't realize I have dyslexia. So as a third grader, I felt I felt abnormal. Like I felt
Yeah.
like I didn't fit in. And it
Yeah.
wasn't until I was 40 years old that I discovered that. And so the only thing I wanted to do was like escape. It wasn't the big dreams of like, hey, I want to be a doctor, I want to be a lawyer, a firefighter. I just wanted to get out.
Yeah.
And once I got older, like I got into high school, I wanted to be a photographer. And I didn't chase it because of how I felt, having that lack of self-esteem. Um, I pursued other things like I wanted to be an X-ray tech, help people out in that area. I didn't finish it. I self-sabotaged, if that makes sense. Like I kind of cut my feet out from underneath me in completing that. But it was honestly one of those once I got into computers, that was where I found some level of confidence to go along with my ability and competence. So, yeah, the dreams, I'd love to tell you, Joe, that I had the dreams. It was honestly just escaping. Like my big
Yeah.
dream was jump on a bicycle and pedal my way across the US to get to Florida to live with my uncle. It wasn't realistic. I mean, race across America is a huge thing. It's an actual event. But as a kid, even as a teenager, man, that was so far out there, but that was like a dream of just get away from home.
So, who was a hero for you? Who was someone that you looked up to that really kind of fueled you to get to a better place?
When I was younger, I would say it was my uncle as far as an escape, right? He was the one. That's why I like the Dolphins. That's also why I like the Dodgers, is because he lived in Southern Florida and they were the close teams, and that's who he was involved with. So I wanted to, be like him. Um, I would say if you ask me that question now, I would say like Andy Andrews. And Andy, his parents passed away for a while. He lived under a bridge, or a pier. Sorry, not a bridge, but he lived under a pier. And then he has changed his life around. And his sons are absolutely amazing. I mean, like night and day from where he was. So he has been an inspiration for me in seeing that what we've experienced isn't what defines our future. We can make a difference and go a different path than what we've come from. So I would say Andy Andrews currently, in the past would be my uncle.
So, if you could meet anybody alive right now that you find fascinating or intriguing and spend some time with them, anybody on the planet, who would it be?
Hmm. I would say really getting to sit down with Andy,
Yeah.
just to have dinner and a conversation to go, what was behind this? Like to really understand how he made those changes and what's continued to give him like the resources and the fuel to keep pushing through in the way that he has. His books are amazing. So he's an author. His He writes very well. So even with my dyslexia, it still keeps me going. Like I want to read and you know hear his stories. But I think being able to sit down, have a meal, um, chat about barbecue, chat about life, being a dad, a husband, a man, like those kind of things. That's who I would pick.
You know, it's interesting. I'm curious for anybody out there that's listening to this, or any men out there that are contemplating things. What's kind of a red flag, do you think, for people to make that leap and to contact you for a consultation? To get to that point where they're like, you know what, I think there's been things that are unresolved, or I think there's something that I need to do that's different. What's the number one indicator with all of the clients that you deal with where they have this moment where they're like, all right, this is what brought me to you, or
Yeah.
it's the thing they need to change?
I would say if that question comes up, Joe, that's a good indicator to at least check.
Yeah.
Not everybody that does check needs that. With the most pivotal part, Joe, and I was in this place, if you're not willing to make the changes, then nothing's going to happen, right? Ask, find out, hey, I've had this experience. This is what I believe. Does this make sense? Am I holding myself back or am I in a good place? Hey, if nothing else, you're in a good place. Fantastic. Full steam ahead. If there's stuff that can be improved and you're willing to make those changes, that is a perfect place to be in because, I mean, how many of us, kind of go, I heard a noise in the car. Does it need like something minor? Does it need something major? You take it to the mechanic. The mechanic lets you know, hey, yeah, this is going to be $50 or this is, $1,000. And those are probably priced low compared to, where it's been before versus
Yeah.
now. But having that clarity, Joe, just gives us peace of mind and can also remove stuff that's holding us back because we can have those doubts, those concerns, and they will be like anchors that we're just kind of dragging along in life. Once you know, hey, you're good, or no, you just need to make this change, this alteration here. Man, it is the most freeing thing. It's almost like going to the gym and finding out that you're doing the wrong kind of bench press or, you're doing your triceps wrong and just making those alterations, those changes can give you the results that you're after.
So, what's the best advice you've ever gotten?
Mm. Best advice I've ever gotten is to love yourself. Man, I did not know how to do that, Joe. I thought I did, but in the way that I grew up in the environment, I didn't truly understand it. But once I loved myself for who I am, flaws and all, experiences and all, it was the most freeing thing that you just don't realize because once I love myself, Joe, then I have the capacity to love those around me, love my wife, love my children, my grandchildren, aunts, uncles, all that family plus friends. I can show up in a different way when I love myself than when I don't.
Yeah.
And it's something we don't really contemplate or realize until we get to that spot.
Yeah. So let me ask you this. Every day you wake up, you're
Mhm.
obviously motivated to help change and transform lives. But what is the ultimate motivator for you to get up and not only do that, but to also evolve as a human yourself?
Mhm. Joe, it's one of looking at the fact that as I have healed and I've grown, and I can see the change that's occurred within my family. And so the more that I change and continue to, grow and elevate myself, it's almost like that saying, a rising tide lifts all boats, right? It's the same thing that happens around us with our family, with our friends, our career. And I know, Joe, that I can change the family legacy that like my grandchildren and great grandchildren will inherit. And knowing that they won't have to go through what I went through, dude, that for me is powerful right there. and keeps me going. And I know that by my changing, it's not only changing my family, but it's also going to impact other men and their children and grandchildren. So it's like, how can I not be excited and encouraged and just, you know, drive to see this kind of like a almost like a ripple in a pond, right?
Yeah.
You throw out that rock, it's like, okay, who else is going to be healed and have a different experience than what they would have before? And right now, if you look at from like what we've talked about for the last 4 years with COVID, Joe, there's a lot of emotional pain that's come up and been amplified because of it.
Yeah.
So being able to make an impact in that area for me is super encouraging.
So of all of the clients that you've had that you've helped, what's one of your
Mhm.
favorite success stories?
I'm going to be selfish on this one, Joe. It's going to be me
Yeah.
because I get to see the difference, right? Joe, I almost repeated the pattern of disowning my children. And that was a pattern that was set by my grandparents and parents. And well, my mom and my grandmother, sorry, let me be more specific, by my mom and her mom, right? So um, I would see them every 2 years start talking. And then 2 years later, they disown each other. 2 years talk, 2 years disown. Joe, it was a cycle just as, spring, summer, fall, winter. It was that same kind of thing.
Yeah.
And I almost committed that same mistake. And a friend said, dude, do you really want to risk this and lose your daughter and her children and being a part of her life and having her in yours? And I was like, no way. He's like, then you need to reframe stuff and look at it differently. And Joe, there's not a day that goes by that I'm not grateful for having been given that advice when it's uncomfortable, right? Joe, if you gave me advice, something like that, it's uncomfortable for you as well because you're risking how I'm going to react. I may not react well,
Yeah.
but having that advice given, Joe, I get to reap the rewards every day because
Mhm.
she is still a part of my life, as is my grandson and her husband. And it's like, dude, the dividends for that, I, I've got to say, I'm my favorite client in that aspect because it's like you'll see the Legos over my left shoulder here. Man, those are from spending time with him and putting those together.
Yeah.
I never would have had that opportunity. So, um, yeah, I hope that helps, Joe.
Well, no, and that's interesting. It's a very apt metaphor of the Lego. It's like piece by piece, day by day, everything
Mhm.
ba- everything builds. It's not all built in one day. It's
Yeah,
done over time, and you got to put a little love into it, polish it. Um, so let me ask you this:
yeah.
of all of the things that you've done, overcome, and become and evolved into in your life, what are you the proudest of?
Taking that first risk, I would say in myself, because the message that I have been taught was if you ask a question, that's a sign of weakness, and if you fail, you're a failure. Joe, that was the scariest moment of my life was asking for help, was asking a couple other guys, and they were younger, none to boot. That just in my mind at that time even compounded like the shame and the failure aspect of it, right? But taking that first step, Joe, to say, hey, what are you guys doing differently to have the life that you have? Because that's the life I want. That first step was the one that set me on this path to where it's like I now have a family that I love being with and wants to be around me. Totally different than what I ever experienced or thought I would have. Because if you had asked me, Joe, where do you see yourself? I saw myself in a studio apartment, lights out, TV on, me sitting in a chair, isolated and alone. That was where I saw myself going because that was what, excuse me, that was what I thought I deserved, Joe,
Sure.
to be in a different place where it's like I have those relationships, um, and just seeing where things are going. Um, I couldn't ask for more in that aspect of it, Joe.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. So everyone has a perception of you, family,
Mhm.
friends, clients, colleagues, but you run the show. What's your perception of you? Who do you think you are?
My perception of me is way different than what it was before. I love to be with people. I love to equip them, right? So, Joe, you have something that is unique about you. I want to help you get to that next level of it, right? Whatever the case is. I love inviting people over to my house, having barbecue, just to sit and chat. And sometimes it's that kind word, sometimes it's an action. What can I do to help you step into a situation you're uncomfortable or feel unconfident in? Um, Loving, laughter, like willing to take a chance. That risk taking that I do now, that I see opportunity instead of like 10 different ways to fail without taking action. Joe, I think that's the difference, is that people see me as being by their side, having their back, loving myself, loving them, and being an equiper and just involved.
So let me ask you this kind of a fantastical question. We get off this Zoom call, a time machine pulls up in front of your house. You can go back in time and see one event in human history. Where are you going?
Wow, Joe.
It's fun. It's like the beginning of the Big Bang Theory. It's like, it's like all these
Yeah,
things are
I'm like, wow, dude. Um, this is totally off topic. I would love, and this is kind of going to go back to KC kind of thing here, Joe. I love smoking. Like for me, the three things in my life, helping men, family, and barbecue. Those are my three big things.
yeah.
I would love to be there in Kansas City when burnt ends went from being a thing that it was just a toss away kind of cut
Uh-huh.
of meat to keep people in line satisfied until they could take their order, to be able to see the change to where it's like, okay, now you're paying top dollar for
Yeah.
burnt ends. I'd love to see how that shift occurred and be a part of it, because it's like burnt ends in my family here, like whether it's pork belly burnt ends or burnt ends from brisket, just huge.
Yeah.
So being able to see that and experience that, that would be something I'd love to go back and do.
That's fascinating. And along that line, I always think about that lab where they were trying to come up with penicillin, where that orange grew all of that mold. Like the person that actually said, let's test this out. And everybody was like, dude, what's the matter with you? And it ended up being the actual antidote to what they were looking for. I
Yeah.
mean, that's the beauty of this life is that all of these accidents turn into miracles. It's just so
Yes.
weird, you know?
Well, and it's like you got to think about who's the unfortunate guy who decided, "Hey, I'm going to try this mushroom. Okay, that one's poisonous.
Yeah.
This one's not."
Yeah.
It's just by looking at things bigger. And granted, I don't want to be the one. I'm not saying I want to be the one to test the mushroom
Yeah.
to see if it's poisonous. I want to understand, okay, are there ways, just like there are with snakes, right? You can determine this is poisonous, this is not. Is there something along the same lines
Yeah.
with mushrooms? Hey, let's take an educated risk.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, just the man, being the guy that's going around and it's like, hey, Mikey will eat it.
Yeah,
I
right.
don't know, man. I'm not that Mikey.
Exactly. Well, maybe we're going to get to a point someday where a robot can do it and it'll change colors. And if it's red, it's bad. If it's
Right.
like a light blue, it's okay. It's
Where AI's going, it very well could, Joe. There's
that's what I'm
there's no
saying.
telling, man.
Yeah. So, Mike, if anyone wants to hire you, learn more about you, reach out, they're impelled, they're inspired, what do they do?
The easiest way, Joe, to get in touch with me is by going to the website hicoachmike.com. HICOACHMIKE.com. There you can take off. If social media is easier for you, fantastic. If you want YouTube, the podcast, whatever, that's the easiest place to get in touch with me is hicoachmike.com.
Right on. Mike, this has been great. What a great story, man. I love this. So, best of luck with everything. And I appreciate it.
Thanks for having me, Joe. I've seriously enjoyed being here and chatting with you.
Yes, sir. Thank you. Have a great day.